One of those business leaders is Mike Novogratz. He's the CEO of Galaxy Investment Partners, a cryptocurrency investment firm. He was an early investor in Bitcoin and SpaceX, and he's joining us now to discuss the business and the One for Democracy campaign. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, just tell us about this campaign and why was it so important for you to be involved?
Sure. So, about a year before the last election, Billy Watterson, who runs our family philanthropy called Galaxy Gives, he came to me and says, we really need to get involved in this election. This election is existential to everything we do. We spend most of our time on criminal justice reform. He said, it's not going to really matter if we lose our democracy. And he wanted me to put a lot of money into this movement. And I said, Billy, it feels like, it's peeing in the ocean and think it's going to get warm. There's so much money going in. What little money that I can put in, even if it's 1% of my net worth, is not going to really move the election. And he came back and said, listen, if we invest in local organizing groups, in this case in the swing states, and give them voice, they know how to get the vote out. They know how to advocate for themselves. And so let's set up this organization and give me a chance. And I gave them a chance and was shocked that in that last election cycle, they found $75 million of donors who were willing to commit in that last election cycle to invest in these local organizing groups. And, the election turned out the way we expected it to. Those grassroots showed up. The organizations came and got out the votes. We fought back voter suppression laws. We pushed for mail-in ballots and really helped try to build the guardrails of democracy. And won. And then we heard from these donors, our partner community, that they wanted to make this a thing, like this, like a philanthropic lane as opposed to a one-off. And so really with the feedback from the people that had participated, we decided to do this full-time, to set up an organization that lasts beyond the election cycle.
So Mike,
mostly because these organizations need money.
Yeah.
And so went back to a lot of the same donors and said, hey, how about re-upping your pledge, this time spread over 4 years, and are well on our way to having a successful organization, hired a new executive director who will start soon, and excited about the future.
Well, Mike, at the same time, there are Republican state legislatures throughout the United States that are working right now to make voting more difficult. That's what they are trying to do. What specifically are you guys doing, and is One for Democracy doing to respond to that?
Listen, so we're funding all kinds of organizations, right? We funded the Florida Restoration Act down in Florida, where Desmond Meade pushed for felons to get their vote back, felons who had served their sentence to get their vote back. Those are the type of organizations. We're funding lawsuits, or organizations that are filing lawsuits. We're funding voter registration, mail-in ballots. And so all of this energy, those same organizations are the ones that mask the grassroots effort to fight back against these initiatives. Some of this stuff will be done in the courts, some will be done at the ballot box.
And Mike, you bring up criminal justice reform, which I know is something you work very closely on. We're just a few days away from the 1 year, I don't want to call it anniversary, but 1 year since George Floyd was murdered. And a lot of the discussion is still on police reform and criminal justice reform. I mean, do you think where we're at right now in the conversation is the way we should be headed? Do you think more needs to be done?
Listen, a lot more needs to be done. I think the country in George Floyd saw with their own eyes a Black man being murdered. And that had a cathartic change in how people thought about fairness in America and criminal justice reform. And so I think the ball went from being pushed uphill to starting to roll downhill. And you're seeing momentum all over the place. There was a law passed yesterday in Connecticut, a phone justice law that gives inmates in the Connecticut system free access to phones, as opposed to being charged exorbitant, usurious rates. And so there's an army of people in this movement, all working on different parts of how do we create a more fair and just criminal justice system. Police reform is a big part of it. And it's a controversial part, right? Because safety is important in every city. If you lose safety, you lose civil society in lots of ways. And so you've got to balance safety with a fair and just police department. And there are plenty of really smart guys and men and women, that are working on this, right? Phil Goff at the Center for Policing Equity is doing kind of, cutting edge work. It's not going to be an easy battle, right? The moment there's any bad activity in the city, people blame the reformers, often without cause. We see the same thing with bail reform, right? Unjust cast bail is a huge civil rights issue in America. We're making progress there, but it's one step forward, a half a step back. And so I do feel like, though, the game is shifted. People know what's the right side of history, right? And I think more and more people are kind of joining the criminal reform army.
Hey, Mike, we can't have you on the show without asking you about crypto. You were early in on this space, and it's been an absolutely wild week. Did you buy more Bitcoin this week?
Yeah. I kind of seem to buy every dip in crypto.
You do?
I have a long-term faith that, and the same reason I got into criminal justice reform, it's about systems change. Crypto at its core is about systems change, right? The blockchain revolution, the crypto revolution is about remaking the financial infrastructure and actually the consumer infrastructure of our country in a more transparent, just, fair way. It came as a response to the 2008 financial crisis. When you talk to the people in the middle of it, they are really revolutionaries. And so I know there's frenzies with things like Dogecoin and Shiba Inu, and everyone gets excited with the kind of gambling aspect of it. But at its core, it's really about rebuilding a system in a way that cuts out the rent taker.
Right.
That is more fair.
So did you buy this dip? We saw a decline of 30% earlier this week.
I bought Bitcoin and Ethereum on the dip.
You did, okay. Kathy Wood was on our air earlier this week. She's a long-term Bitcoin bull as well. She still thinks the price can get to $500,000. What do you see the price ultimately being for Bitcoin?
So listen, I think that's a decent target. If you want to think about Bitcoin in the crypto ecosystem has taken this lane of digital gold, of a store of value. And we have a financial system right now in the US where the old head of the central bank is actually running the Treasury Department. So if you believed in independent central banking, that's kind of metaphorically an important thing to understand. Like, we've lost independent central banking. We have a central bank that is printing money nonstop. And because of it, right, fiat currencies are being devalued and debased. And so gold is rallying. Bitcoin as the new digital version of gold has been rallying. I think Bitcoin will surpass gold in 3 or 4 years. That makes it about 500,000, assuming gold stays where it is. And I actually think gold goes higher. And so how is it going to get there? It's going to get there with more adoption. I was on the phone with the head of one of the largest, pensions in the country yesterday, and they are unbelievably deep in the weeds of Bitcoin. Haven't bought a lot yet, but they're deep in the weeds in it. And so I just see institutions looking at this as a hedge versus, our Treasury Department and central banks' ability to actually get the economy landed with deficits that continue to grow, and a Congress that wants to and maybe should want to spend to deal with the inequality gap that we have.
Mike,
right? We don't have the Tea Party anymore saying stop spending money. We have a progressive party on the Democratic side saying we should have free college. Right. We should really have UBI in lots of ways.
Who is the pension fund?
I can't tell you who our customers are.
Okay, one of the biggest though in the country. I mean, that's a big hint, I think.
Definitely, Mike. You mentioned the Treasury. We also saw yesterday the U.S. Treasury announced that it wanted every crypto transfer larger than $10,000 to be reported to the IRS. Is this a good thing?
Listen, there's going to be regulation that comes down, and the crypto community is going to work in tandem with the regulators to try to get fair regulation that actually helps the industry expand, with making sure that the government has the confidence in the system that they need. It starts in 2023. That's a long way from here, and there are probably some tweaks. But I tell everybody in crypto, pay your taxes. I've paid my taxes on crypto every year. if you want to be a citizen of this country, you should pay your taxes. And so, tax surveillance isn't the end of the world. Where it starts and if it's on hosted or unhosted wallets, there's lots of nuance in this. But right now it's for big institutions, and I think that's fair.
And Mike, I mean, just ending the week that was and looking at, I mean, you bring up all of the other coins that are out there, Ethereum, Dogecoin. We have a coin here named after our very own Joe Weisenthal here in the building. I mean, when you look back at the past 5 days, do you think what we have seen sort of helped or potentially hurt the crypto cause?
Listen, when you think about something like Dogecoin, this is a young group of people that got together. It started as a meme. It became their passion, their calling. It tells you something that Doge can get to, $50 billion market cap or whatever, $80 billion market cap. It tells you that the Federal Reserve is printing lots of money and there's something wild going on. That a LeBron James basketball card just sold for $5 million. A card like that would have sold for $300,000 18 months ago. And so those, I would call them tempest in a teapot crazes, are endemic to the monetary conditions we're living in today. I don't think it helps the overall crypto revolution. There's a really serious revolution going on built by guys like Vitalik Buterin, who's, the kind of champion of the Ethereum ecosystem. There's huge amounts of human capital, brain power going into trying to rebuild this infrastructure. And I think the bubbles, the crazes kind of take away from that. That said, I don't want to discredit that community. They're young guys, people made lots of money, they believe in it. There's something very tribal that's going on Twitter. It's going on in our country, right? You try to convince a Trump supporter that the election wasn't stolen and they'll come to fisticuffs with you. And so when I criticize some of these crypto communities and say, well, I don't really see the use case, I get violent response, at times death threats. And so I think it's endemic to our country is we're a bit of a broken country. We need to heal ourselves. We've got a chance, one of the reasons we did One for Democracy is we had a chance really, to start trying to write that, to give people voice who haven't had voice, to try to heal this fractured land that we have. But you see it literally graphically on Twitter in the crypto world. And so,
yeah, you do. Sometimes you don't want to be, sometimes you really regret being in those threads. At least I certainly do on Twitter because, especially with anonymity, Mike. Hey, I just want to end talking a little bit about the short-term impact of regulation. And if we're going to start to see more wild swings like we saw, if we do start to hear more from the government about regulating cryptocurrencies.
Listen, I think we're going to hear more from the government, right? Gary Gensler took over the SEC. Gary's a very smart guy. He taught a course at MIT on blockchain and crypto. He's going to address the issues. We're hoping the SEC gives a regulatory sandbox for new projects. We're hoping they approve an ETF. I think that's probably late fourth quarter, early first quarter. But clarity will help the space, certainly the institutional side of the space. And so I'm not fearful of regulation. I'm fearful of bad regulation, but I'm optimistic that, the crypto community is a big community now, and it's a well-funded community, and it's a well-connected community. And let me tell you, we're in conversation across the board with the regulators. And hopefully, we've got smart people in government. They know a lot more about this space than most people think. Certainly the young people at all the agencies, CFTC, if it's Treasury, if it's SEC, they all are long crypto. And so I think hopefully things end up in a good place.
Absolutely. Well, we really appreciate you being here with us to talk about it all. Galaxy CEO Mike Novogratz, thank you so much for your time and for sharing some more about the One for Democracy campaign.